Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to point out how the acolytes of Brexit seem to be reacting when their project is backed into a corner. When challenged to face the consequences of Brexit, they run deeper down the rabbit hole to ever more ludicrous solutions, as we have seen in particular with the news on net migration this week. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So we've had an expected and a more surprising Brexit reaction in the past few days. The expected one is the one we've seen before, we anticipated before we ever left the EU. It's not Brexit that's the problem, it's the way it's been implemented. Those backing Brexit, but from the outside of government, we're always going to use this line: it's the way it was done. If only we'd have been in charge, it'd be marvellous. It was the right idea, incompetently managed. And you can see this from tweets such as this: Brexit hasn't failed. The problem we must solve is the lack of vision. These claims that Brexit delivered what we needed, but the delivery isn't being used, is now a commonplace defence. They can't claim that Brexit's a success because people don't believe it. The latest polling shows that 56% of people think leaving the EU was the wrong decision, to 32% who still think it was right. A fifth of people who voted to leave think it was now the wrong decision. And that's leaving the EU. There will be some people who are potentially satisfied that we should have left the EU, but not the single market and customs union. You know, these public opinions, they bob up and down, as public opinion on all policies do, but the trend is one of ever increasing dissatisfaction with Brexit and diminishing satisfaction. It's not just a load of don't knows are deciding actually, yeah, Brexit was the wrong idea, but the supporters remaining stable. No. So they need an excuse. They can't argue that Brexit's doing well because people just do not believe it. But here's the thing, their excuse is that the government are too timid to use the new freedoms, as if they were, to pardon the expression, too conservative. But this is the same government who pulled us out the EU with a very weak deal, landed our businesses with massive trade barriers without any help. The idea that the same government who created such chaotic and traumatic market conditions for our businesses are somehow too cautious to unleash Brexit isn't credible. You know, they sort of managed to get the argument to work in the early years because staunch Remainer Theresa May was Prime Minister and she tried to make up her cabinet a balance of Remainers and Leavers. Theresa May didn't even try and pretend that she thought Brexit was a good idea. She just pretended to be committed to making it work. Wasn't really a balanced cabinet either, even though in theory there were the same number of Remainers and Leavers, because some of the Remainers were Eurosceptic, pragmatic Remainers like Sajid Javid and Liz Truss. They were classed as Remainers, but they were never really pro-EU. But it was to give the impression that a compromise was being sought. That was the impression she tried to push. So it was easy for Brexiteers to argue that we have a problem with Brexit because it's been delivered by those who don't really believe in it. But this has ceased to be a credible argument for several years now. You know, since halfway through 2019, really. I mean, yes, we know Boris Johnson didn't really believe in Brexit either, but they all claim that he was an undeniable believer, that he was a convert. And you can hardly describe Johnson as timid. In fact, both Johnson and Truss have been incredibly reckless. But when the reality of Brexit emerged, there was always going to be sort of no defence other than trying to blame the way it was being implemented. So what do they think we're still getting wrong? They'll still talk about the regulations that they want to destroy with the retained EU law bill. Some may genuinely be insane enough to think that this will help our post-Brexit future. Won't, of course. I've discussed in the past how it actually makes our country a very uncertain place to invest in. It's a way of telling businesses and investors, you know, when they ask, okay, so what are your laws on, say, consumer rights or employment rights or environmental standards? It's a way of telling those investors, we don't know. Well, we know what they are now, but they're probably going to change in a year or maybe 2 years. We don't know. We don't know what the law is going to be in the UK over the next few years. No idea. It means being uncertain as to whether you will have to give your employees paid leave or maternity and paternity leave. You know, of telling them, we don't know what the health and safety regulations are going to be. We don't know what consumer protections is going to be, what environmental standards is going to be. Thousands of rules and regulations are facing the chop, and nobody knows what the impact will be because there's not been any assessment. No one's done a study. No one's looked at them and gone, okay, well, the consequence of chopping this would be this for these thousands. There's no time to. It's impossible. There's been no assessment of how it's going to change the way businesses can operate. No assessment of how the public will react to suddenly not having any worker or consumer rights. Are we to assume that people will just go, oh, we're going from 20 odd days of paid leave to none at all and just accept it? It's a policy based on the notion that businesses had it best during the most Dickensian depths of the Victorian age, where life was cheap and the wealthy did as they pleased, and on the assumption that people will just take it, which of course they won't. They will say, well, we will vote for someone who will reverse all this madness. So you get more uncertainty. Are we going to bring those regulations back once they're gone? Are we going to bring them back? We don't know. Probably because people don't like it. But we don't know. Uncertainty for year after year after year. Then there's this latest nonsense from the government on immigration. So it's been reported this week that net migration hits a record high of just over 500,000 in a year. Yes, we can poke at the Brexiteers going, you said immigration would come down. In reality, it's not actually immigration in the way the gammons think it is. The problem with the Brexiteers when they talk about immigration is they jam lots of different types of immigration together as if they're all the same thing and all bad. Economic migration, asylum-seeking refugees, and genuinely illegal immigration. They don't distinguish, which means that when figures like this are reported, everyone loses their minds. Brexit was supposed to mean lower migration. What about these figures then? Well, a load of it is a one-time influx of Hong Kong and Ukrainian refugees. That's not going to be repeated next year, is it? And it has public support. Okay, well, what about the rest? Well, half of them are students. They're coming here, pumping money into our economy, learning about our culture. It's a form of soft power on our part. That so many people from around the world want to study in the UK shows that we are still seen as having something of value even after Brexit. That's a positive. In fact, these are people coming to the country to spend a lot of money in our economy. No, don't like the sound of that. Ban them. What? Ban people coming here to spend money in our economy to get a British education? Yeah, ban them. Even though they pay way more for that tuition than domestic students and are sort of subsidising our own education system. Yeah, get rid of them. And for some numpty on the telly to say that is one thing. Some shock jock. But for the Prime Minister to seriously suggest he's thinking about it is mind-blowing. Rishi Sunak has actually said he's considering blocking a load of student visas now. I don't seriously think he will. I certainly don't think he wants to. I don't think there's even a serious desire to do this even amongst the ERG within the Tory party. So I can't see there being any great pressure to do so from within his party. But the fact that he's even saying it means he's afraid of how it's looking. He's worried about the emergence of Reform UK, the rebranded Brexit party, and he wants to cut the rug from under their feet. Because he could have just said, this is ridiculous. Most of these people are students. Quite a lot of the rest, in fact, most of the rest are refugees from Hong Kong, Ukraine, Afghanistan and Syria, for which, there is public support. Even the gammons have no issue with that. And the students coming over to spend a few years spending a load of money, then going back to their own countries. He could have just said that. He could have just said that the vast majority, which would be true, are these people. Don't be silly. Because the consequences of actually massively reducing the number of student visas would have the following consequences. First, it would reduce the options for UK students. Because now some departments who rely on the extra that foreign students pay for tuition, it would prevent those courses being viable, so they'd get the job. Second, it would hit the economy of the cities where those universities are based. Both gammons and the innocent alike would lose their jobs as the local economy shrinks down to compensate for the loss of foreign money being spent there. Third, it would reduce our cultural influence around the world. A lot of political and business leaders all over the world are educated in the UK. That's a good thing when it comes to how we are perceived internationally. So this move would reduce our soft power. It would be an act of the most incredible stupidity. Or it would be if you assume that the Tories actually want to make the UK stronger and are just getting it badly wrong. There is a school of thought which suggests many of them know that Brexit weakens the UK, and that's actually the whole point for them. There's money to be made from a country in decline. But things like this can't happen just on the strength of disaster capitalists. There's not enough of them. It also needs the help of those who get trapped into doing so to avoid looking stupid or losing their support. It's what's largely driven Brexit from start to finish. The majority of Tory MPs didn't want a referendum. The majority of Tory MPs didn't want to go ahead with it. There's never been a majority in favour of Brexit or what it's delivered, even amongst Conservative MPs. It's been helped along by people who were backed into a corner and had to accept the nonsense that their voters had swallowed and just hoped there would be some way of averting it all further down the line. Sunak's doing what all politicians in power do when they spot a trap. He's saying he'll look into it, in the hope that looking into it takes long enough for voters to get bored and move on to the next nonsense. But if they don't, we know from past experience, he'll go along with it. He'll go along with it for the sake of another few months in power. It seems there's nothing too stupid for Brexiteers to support if their arguments are backed into a corner. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.